Today is Thursday, February 12th, 2026. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. America is sending troops to Nigeria. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating, all those good things, and help us out. Help this podcast get noticed. Spread the word. Share with a friend. We'd appreciate that. And you can always email us as well. We enjoy hearing from you at quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. That's our email address, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org, because we're glad you're here with us, getting through the news of the day bright and early. Joining me today, CBN's Trey Goins-Phillips. A lot to get to on the pod today. On the focus story, a major shakeup at Trump's Religious Liberty Commission.
Yep, anti-Semitism was unfortunately front and center yet again. As a country, it's something we've been grappling with. So this is the latest iteration of that, and the responses are pouring in. So we'll dive into that in a minute.
All right, details on that coming up in just a moment. Also, on the main thing, is President Trump backing off a possible strike on Iran? A new report claims a planned decapitation strategy didn't come with the guarantees that he wanted. CBN's Gary Lane's breaking that down on the main thing today. All right, want to tell you about our sponsor of the podcast today, Christian Solidarity International. And this is a group that is on the ground helping Christians in need. We're always asking you to pray, and that is our first line of defense, to pray for persecuted Christians around the world. But another step you can take here is to help those who are on the ground, helping these people out in their day-to-day lives, helping pastors, walking alongside them, staying in it for the long haul. And there are tons of examples of this, including a story of a young mother who'd been abducted during a raid, forced into all these years of unpaid labor, beaten, even as she was just trying to pray, and separated from her children. Just a terrible situation. But this is the kind of thing that happens over and over and over again in places like Nigeria, which we're going to hear about that troop movement here in just a minute. But this is what CSI does. They go in, they help free people like this mom who'd been abducted. They reunited her with her family, helped her return, gave her the tools to rebuild her life. Again, they're in it for the long haul. They're doing this faithfully and effectively. So if you want to partner with our partner here at CSI, then go to csi-usa.org. and you can help walk alongside and support the work that CSI is doing on the front lines to help persecuted Christians around the globe. That's csi-usa.org, csi-usa.org. All right, we are going to go to the news in 90 now, and America is reportedly sending troops into Nigeria. As Islamist violence surges, they're going to deploy 200 troops to help train local forces who are there battling Islamic terrorist groups like Boko Haram and ISIS West Africa. The troops will not engage in direct combat, but will provide technical guidance, intelligence coordination, and air-to-ground operational support across multiple bases. The move comes after recent U.S. missile strikes on suspected ISIS camps in Nigeria on Christmas Day, and amid growing concern in Washington over those escalating attacks, particularly against Christian communities. President Trump sharply criticized Nigeria's handling of anti-Christian violence, previously describing the situation as a genocide and warning of potential consequences if attacks continue. Terror threat remains significant. Boko Haram and Islamic State West Africa province continue their attacks in the northern and middle belt regions. And some heartbreaking news out of Hollywood. James Van Der Beek has died at 49. The actor, best known for his role in Dawson's Creek, reportedly passed away following his battle with stage 3 colorectal cancer. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And Trey, James Van Der Beek used kind of he got diagnosed there in, I think, November of 2024. And in his last months that he had here, he used his platform as an actor, and a lot of people followed him, to encourage others to pay attention to their bodies and get screened, reminding fans that early detection can make all the difference. And, you know, the age to get tested for this particular cancer and for other illnesses that you might have has been moved up. It used to be 50, now it's 45. And so it's something that you should be doing, and you should be not taking it lightly if you have any signs or things that are changing. Because listen, I'm 50 now, and I'll tell you, the body starts, you're not 20 anymore, basically, is what I'll say. So things start happening and things start changing. So don't take them lightly and just keep going on through, because you never know what could be there underneath, especially now we're just seeing so many cancer cases, and it's tragic.
Yeah, it is scary that not only are people being diagnosed with these forms of cancer younger, but especially here in America, I know that our diets contribute to it. We don't have the best diet if you look at the statistics from other countries around the world. So I think that is alarming and something I think we need to take a look at. I know that's something that the Trump administration, in fact, has been looking into, which is encouraging to see that. But ultimately, the larger picture, of course, we're heartbroken for Vanderbeek's family that are left behind. But as a Christian, I'm encouraged to know that we ought to be wise stewards of our health and of our bodies. God calls us to that. But also, God holds all these things in his hands, right? He's sovereign. So trusting the Lord with our lives is what's most important. And having your eternal house in order is what matters most. And stories like this are just a good reminder of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and listen, cancer, we know everyone's impacted by that in some way, shape, or form. Unfortunately, in our fallen world, this is the sort of thing that we have to deal with. So praying for everybody who is dealing with something cancer related right now in their life.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go to the focus story now. And as we mentioned, a member of this Religious Liberty Commission got booted. So what sparked the controversy here? This was all over the internet yesterday.
Yeah, so during a public hearing at the White House Religious Liberty Commission earlier this week in Washington, D.C., one of the members, Carrie Prejean Bowler, she drew pretty intense criticism for her remarks about anti-Semitism and Israel. And during a panel focused on combating anti-Semitism, she argued that conservative media figures like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson are not anti-Semitic and have never said anything that was even remotely close to anti-Semitism. And then she went on to suggest that her Catholic faith prevents her from supporting Zionism, comments that drew some audible boos from the audience. And of course, as you might expect, some sharp pushback from witnesses. Other Christians, as well as even members of the Jewish faith, said, well, you can't really paint with that broad of a brush. You can't say that all Catholics feel this way about anything. This was a Jewish man at one point saying, just like I can't say all Jews feel this way about this thing, it's a bit dangerous for you to paint with that broad of a brush, whether you're talking about Catholics, Protestants, or people who are Jewish. So cautioned her against that, and she pushed back again and said that that is what her faith teaches, and that, again, people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens have never said anything that, in her view, could be construed as anti-Semitism. And like I said, as you might expect, that launched quite a bit of pushback, both there at the commission, but also online.
And so why was she eventually removed from the commission?
Yeah, this happened very swiftly. Like I said, the commission's hearing was just at the beginning of this week, and now it's Thursday morning, and Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who chairs the commission, has just announced on social media that Bowler has been completely removed from the commission. He said in a statement that at the hearing, her conduct hijacked what was supposed to be a focused discussion on anti-Semitism. Instead, he argued she used it for her own political agenda. And Bowler is a former Miss California and has been a long time Trump supporter. She had refused calls to resign and insisted that she would continue speaking out against what she coined as Zionist supremacy. But Patrick stepped in and just pulled the plug and said, okay, well, you're just not a member of the commission then anymore.
So what has been the response to that move?
Well, as you might imagine, people like Candace Owens online have been framing it as an attack against Bowler, as censorship against dissenting voices, and claimed that Bowler is being punished. And then others on the other side of the debate have said, the opposite of that. First Liberty, in a statement, Kelly Shackelford, the president and CEO there and chief counsel for First Liberty, he said, the attempted hijacking of yesterday's commission meeting to promote an anti-Semitic agenda was disgusting. First Liberty Institute proudly represents synagogues and other Jewish clients, and we will continue to represent their cause as a core part of our mission to defend all people of all faiths in America. We will always be a friend to the Jewish people. I look forward to continuing the valuable work of the commission so that we can present President Trump with a roadmap to restore and defend religious liberty for all Americans. So it runs the gamut, but as you might expect, people like Candace and people like Tucker are seeing this as a huge attack against them and against free speech. And others are saying, look, it's fine for you to not support the government of Israel, but you can't spew things that are very clearly anti-Semitic and then claim, well, that's not anti-Semitism. I'm just disagreeing with a country's political decisions. So that kind of framing has been described as dangerous.
Yeah, and you just can't help but think this whole thing was performative. She wore a Palestinian little lapel thing on her blazer there that she was wearing at the hearing. She went back and forth with Seth Dillon, and you can't help but think that perhaps this is sort of exactly what she wanted now, because I happened to notice, because I'm like, oh, when I first saw the interaction between Seth Dillon and her, I thought she might have been, do you remember the the pageant contestant that went viral for the whole maps thing? She gave that kind of meandering answer. She obviously just lost her train of thought and just tried to talk, and nothing good came out. But that's not who that was. So she's a different pageant contestant. So anyway, so I was looking to see if she was the same one, and I happened to notice that she had only a few thousand followers on X. But today she's up to 60,000 followers just about at the time of this recording. Probably going to be a lot higher than that by the time you double check it. But you just can't help but think that this is just sort of part of the grift. She immediately went in defending Candace Owens in this thing. And of course, you know what's going to happen. Candace is going to defend you. You're going to get a zillion likes and retweets from Candace. And so it all feels disingenuous to me. And it's just sad, really.
Yeah, we should note too that as that one Jewish member of the commission noted, that you can't speak with that broad of a brush about all Catholics. Simone Rizkallah, the director of the Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism, just recently released a statement saying the Catholic Church teaches unequivocally that anti-Semitism is a grave sin, that crude forms of replacement theology are incompatible with Catholic faith, that the Jewish people remain beloved of God, and that the covenant God made with Israel has not been revoked. These are not optional opinions. They belong to the church's authoritative teaching. So, much probably to Bowler's chagrin, apparently not all Catholics do think exactly alike about Israel.
Yeah, man. Unfortunately, we're seeing this debate become more and more vile with each passing week. And let's just pray that some sanity prevails here and that there are good voices standing up and speaking truth to these sorts of situations and these conversations. So keep praying that more and more voices are uplifted in those. Appreciate you bringing that one to the podcast today. We're going to go now to the main thing, and President Trump as he prepares to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Epic Times investigative reporter Joshua Phillip says behind the scenes, the White House reconsidered military action against Iran. Why? No assurance the regime would fully collapse and fears of sleeper cells. CBN's Gary Lane has the details on today's main thing.
Talks are stalled between the United States and Iran, with the Iranian foreign minister refusing to budge on two key issues: ballistic missiles and nuclear enrichment. Not up for discussion. So what are the chances these talks fall apart? Could President Trump move forward with military strikes against Iran? Joining us is someone who has been following this extensively, Joshua Phillip. He's investigative reporter with the Epoch Times and host of Crossroads. It's good to talk with you again, Josh. So tell us, President Trump is set to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Wednesday. Israel doesn't want Iran to rebuild its ballistic missile and nuclear programs, and Iran will not negotiate that. So Where's all this leading? Iran acting on its own, or Israel acting on its own against Iran? U.S. joining in again like last June?
Well, so Israel has maintained its stance that Iranian nuclear programs are kind of a red line. If Iran reaches a certain state of nuclear enrichment where they can start building ballistic missiles, whether America helps them or not, they're going to go and blow up those facilities. I think Trump last time, basically Israel was saying we're going to do it with or without you. They did, the kind of basketball speech, they did the old alley-oop. And Trump kind of slam dunked it, and that's what happened, blowing up their nuclear facilities. Trump saw an opportunity, he took it. More recently, what happened was that it looked like Trump was actually going to send bombers to Iran again and do leadership decapitation. A lot of people were anticipating it. We were waiting around all night. Will the bombers do it? And there's bets online about this. Will Trump do it? The rumor going around, the claims behind the scenes are this. Trump backed off because he was not guaranteed complete leadership decapitation in Iran. And without that complete leadership decapitation, without a guarantee of a collapse of the Iranian regime, they will counterattack. They'll attack U.S. military bases, and we can get pulled into a much broader conflict. Trump does not want that. And so what Trump is doing instead is he's doing kind of a third option. He's using what worked during his first term in office. He's using what has recently worked, which is cutting off the finances of the Iranian regime. And if you remember Trump's first term in office, what happened? Well, even when Obama was president, when Iran was losing its money, when sanctions were cutting too deep, when the economy was collapsing, basically people's quality of life was going out the window. And you had mass protests in Iran. People were going to overthrow the regime. America could sit back, put its hands up in the air, and Iran would collapse because the people would dissolve the state. Obama bailed him out the first time for a hostage deal where he gave him pallets full of cash. Biden bailed them out after Trump, when again he gave them relief on the sanctions and then released all the money that was held by sanctions. Trump has brought all that back. And now what Trump is doing is he's even threatening to punish countries that are still doing oil trades with Iran. That would be China. That would be even India. That'd be many countries. And so Trump is going to put the financial pressure on Iran and let them feel that. And we'll see what happens from there, whether that is enough to bring them to the negotiating table or whether there's the other possibility, which I believe might be the case, that a lot of the Iranian leadership has probably already left the country, either to China or Russia. And very likely they're running the country from outside the system, so they're not afraid for their lives anymore. So leadership decapitation is basically impossible. That's kind of where things are at in my eyes.
Well, Josh, let's just look at this. If there is an attack on some nuclear sites again or some other facilities inside Iran, you've mentioned retaliation against U.S. bases in the region, but how about domestically? How about sleeper cells inside the U.S.? How vulnerable are we? Targets like our power grid, maybe not even to sleeper cells, but cyber security, cyber attacks.
As crazy as this sounds, there are two main threats with Iran. One is the global networks of Hezbollah. The other big one is Iranian agents working through the, their kind of military intelligence agencies, right? So Hezbollah actually has a lot of influence, especially throughout Latin America. They're tied in with the drug cartels, even going back well over a decade. I had sources in Mexico and in the United States telling me that they even had training camps in Tijuana, right over the U.S.-Mexico border. They had taught the drug cartels how to build IEDs, improvised explosive devices. They had even worked with the drug cartels on some tunnel building technology for drug trafficking. Going to other parts of Latin America, in Brazil, in Venezuela. Part of the policy for Trump to even do trade with Venezuela is to push out Russia, China, and Iran. They have huge power. Hezbollah even has political parties in some countries. Peru, for example, has a Hezbollah political party. And so they have huge influence in narco-terrorism. They have huge influence in government, which we don't even think about here. They have huge influence. They also have the ability to pull the strings of global terrorism. Lone wolf terrorists, radicalization, even state-sanctioned, terrorist attacks. They have those powers. That is absolutely a threat in the United States. The other factor is something we've seen only recently. The Iranian regime even does assassinations on American soil. And what they do is they do contract work through mafias, through organized crime networks. And look, this may sound crazy. In New York City, where I'm at right now, there were agents arrested for doing that. And the story happening in New York, one of the ones just in Queens, New York, in fact, they arrested members of Eastern European organized criminal networks working with Iranian agents, and they were conspiring to assassinate an Iranian journalist, an independent journalist. So they will, and they have the power. In fact, they're facing criminal charges for it, some of these individuals. They have the power to do even targeted assassinations on American soil. So maybe that is part of it. We don't know, but that could be part of it.
Yeah, they even tried that against a Saudi ambassador, I think, in Washington, D.C. not long ago.
That's right. Yeah. And they wanted to have the guy afterwards carry out a terrorist attack. That's right.
Josh, I can't let you go without talking about the Old Testament, the book of Ezekiel. There's a prophecy in chapter 38 and 39 about the war of Gog and Magog, and we interpret it to mean Russia, Turkey, Iran, several other countries joining together to take military action against the land of Israel. So even though we're in this lull now, and it doesn't look like Trump's going to strike immediately, are we getting closer to this biblical battle?
Well, let's put it this way. Biblical prophecy or not, the exact replica of that prophecy is part of the Chinese Communist Party's public war plan. So whether we believe this is the fulfilling of prophecy or whether we believe that, hey, just look at what's happening, that is exactly what the CCP was planning to do. So their public war plan, something disclosed, public, this is not a rumor. One of the main advisors to Xi Jinping, right, the head of the CCP, is a guy named Qin Canrong. Several years back, prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, prior to October 7th, prior to all of that, Qin Canrong had a war plan for the CCP. And he said, if China is going to start a war with the United States, if they're going to invade Taiwan and possibly become entrenched in a war against America, the United States is designed, our military at least, designed to fight two wars simultaneously. So if they're going to win, they have to get us involved in at least 4 wars. They said they wanted to get America involved in a war with Russia, just like the prophecy says. They wanted America involved in a war against a terrorist organization, which would be, of course, the Middle East and people targeting Israel. And they wanted a war in Latin America. At the time, they actually wanted Brazil to start a war. Later on, that moved to very likely, and I think we avoided this, Brazil and Venezuela were actually planning to invade Guyana prior to Trump's capturing of Maduro. That we probably avoided a war in Latin America. Venezuela had already moved its military to the border of Guyana. They'd already moved their navy right there. Rubio sent them a warning, and right after that was when this whole thing started with Venezuela. We stopped a war from taking place there. But the CCP said it needed those 3 wars before it invaded Taiwan. If that happened, that would be World War III. Yeah. Now, are we avoiding that? Currently, but very narrowly. But very likely, the CCP wants that on the table still. What would that look like? We'd become involved in a war, at least Europe would, against Russia. We would be supporting it financially and with military supplies. We'd be fighting a war against a global terror network targeting Israel. They would, and we would probably be defending our ally in Israel. And we'd be entrenched in a regional war. Terrorists, drug traffickers, subversive networks, mass migration because of displaced people in Latin America, because of the invasion of Guyana. And then China would invade Taiwan. Our Navy would be focused on that, and we'd be divided. We don't have wartime production for military assets. We don't have rare earth minerals. We don't have medication because we gave those away to China. Trump right now is trying to rapidly rebuild them so we could have a war and actually make it. But we're in a very narrow pass right now. If you were to take my belief, I think that we have avoided the prospect of World War III, but very narrowly, very, very narrowly.
Thanks for being with us, Josh. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, Carrie, appreciate that report there. And that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing.
We are looking at Isaiah 2:5 today. It says, "Come, descendants of Jacob, let us walk in the light of the Lord."
Amen. Let's all do that. Let's walk in the light of the Lord. Let's not be bitter. Let's not be vile. Let's just follow Christ and walk in the light. Great spot to leave it on this edition of the Quick Start Podcast. As always, get on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. Also, check out our partners at csi-usa.org to help persecuted Christians. God bless. See you back here tomorrow.